turn the volume down and see if that helps?
Mine's okay.
Right, welcome to the Planning Committee, ladies and gentlemen. This is a council meeting which is held in public. It is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest exit. The large screen at the front of the room, nearest the large screen at the front of the room, and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording the meeting this evening using our webcast system. Webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. Please set all mobile devices to off or silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Generally, the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. Anyone intending to film or audio record any part of the meeting is asked to do so in a manner that does not disrupt the meeting, and please refrain from filming the public gallery. The process this evening will be that the officer will present. Then members of the committee get an opportunity to ask any questions they need to clarify. After that, I will take the meeting out of session for those people who have indicated to me before the meeting that they wish to speak. And when they have done so, we'll go back into session and no members of the public will be allowed to speak on that item again. Thank you very much. So we move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. We have no apologies this evening. Declarations of interests and lobbying, members. Councillor Rimmer.
So firstly, agenda item 4, I had to pay £1.50 to receive my lobbying material. Because they didn't put the right postage on it. But I have been lobbied. Item 6, I am the cabinet member who is in charge of economic stimulus and tourism. I've had dealings with the cinema, but in respect to the signage, I have had no dealings. I didn't have any dealings in terms of how many signs, how big the signs. So I feel like I can approach this with a totally open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors for item 4 and 6. Item 4.
Councillor Sargent.
Lobbied on item 5.
Thank you, Councillor Schrader.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've been lobbied on item 4, but I didn't have to pay for any postage and I didn't receive anything through the post. I have taken the decision to recuse myself on item 5 because I objected to a previous iteration of the development there when I wasn't on the committee. And in relation to item 6, like Councillor Rimmer, I'm a member of the Cabinet, so I've had some tangential dealings with the cinema, but I have an open mind on this particular planning matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schrader. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I've been lobbied on item 5 and following legal advice, I've been advised to declare the fact that I live on Langdon Road.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I've been lobbied on item 5.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I've been lobbied on item 5.
Councillor Brockman.
Thank you, Chair. I bet you don't know where I've been lobbied. Item 5.
Councillor Myers.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting you said that, Craig, because I've not paid my postage and mine was £2.50. I've refused to pay it. So if that's the case, then someone has tried to lobby me on item 4 and I've been lobbied on item 5. Thank you.
And I have also been lobbied on on item 5. Councillor Moore wishes to come back.
Along with Councillor Brown, I also live on Langdon Road on item 4.
Thank you very much. Are there any further declarations, ladies and gentlemen? No?
Can I say something about this? Thank you, members, for your declarations there. I think it's probably worth me reminding you of the distinction, as it seems to me, about the matters on which you've been lobbied, and you are all aware, I'm sure, of what that requires of you in terms of keeping an open mind, allowing for predisposition but not predetermination, and that's the test. It's the same test for all of the items, but item 6 is slightly different. That's the cinema site, and I know that the legal team here at the council have emailed you all, and ideally their advice is that the decision of this committee about that signage is made by members who are not also cabinet members. And I know that that's 2 of you, isn't it? That's Councillor. Oh, right. Okay. It is, of course, always a matter for you. I'll remind you again of the distinction between predisposition and predetermination, but the absolute counsel of caution would be that, if possible, the committee makes its decision on the new advertising at the cinema of a committee constituted by those who aren't also cabinet members.
Did you wish to ask clarification on that, Councillor Rimmer?
Sorry, I was a bit discourteous in not saying I have read the legal advice. I've taken it on board. I still believe myself and actually I can't speak for my fellow cabinet members, but I'm sure they say the same. Still believe ourselves to be of total open-mindedness on this. Thank you. And we will be making a decision on it tonight.
Again, Councillor Rimmer, you can only speak for yourself on that particular point. Councillor Blake?
100% agree with the comments made by Councillor Rimmer.
Okay, so let's leave it at that. You've been given advice. You're the members. It's up to you whether how you act. Can we now move on to the item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 21st of February, please? Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of those minutes, please? Thank you. That's 10. Abstentions? 1. Thank you. Moving on now then to item, I'm going to because Councillor Shardo is going to recuse himself from item 5, I'm going to change the order. We're going to do the cinema application item 6 first. Okay, so can I hand over to the officer to present, please?
So this application is for 4 new illuminated fascia signs to replace the existing signage with view. They will be located to the north, south, and west, with the western and 2 southern signs being the most prominent facing towards the town centre. There are no objections from Highways, and in the committee update sheet towards the end, we can see that the Essex County Council Place Services Built Heritage raises no objection to the application. And the signs are acceptable in their size, location, and method of illumination.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was short and sweet, wasn't it? Does anyone have any matters of clarification? Councillor Rimmer?
Just a really quick one, Chair, and yourself. I just wanted to know, obviously, from what I can see, it's not impinging on the mosaic in any way. Is that because obviously that was a nice feature that was put in to be sympathetic with Basildon? Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so, yes. Sorry, I would say so, yes.
Thank you. And obviously these signs are illuminated, and there's 4 of them, and it's replacing the 2. I mean, is there any, I guess, in terms of the luminance of it, is it making it extra bright in terms of residents? Has that been, of Brookhouse and others, has that been considered?
So the level of illumination for the signs is acceptable with Highways, 300 candelas, which is low-level illumination. And they have no objection to the level that they have proposed.
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that also there will be a planning condition to make sure that the 300 candelas is put on, carried out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Ms. Borbo, when you speak, could you possibly speak into the microphone, because some members are having difficulty hearing you? Okay, if we've asked all the questions we want to, Councillor Aldridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted, I noticed normally with a lot of applications we have a wildlife sort of bird sort of surveys that are done. I just wondered, because of some of the signs being so high up, I'm wondering if there's across the near to the roof line any sort of birds and stuff, like swifts, swallows, bats nesting and stuff. So I just wondered whether anything was, whether we knew anything about the type of lights as to whether any light is going literally vertically up the walls towards where the roof line would be. That would get, because if the lights are going to be on over all night, it could disturb the birds' sleeping habits and patterns and things like that. I just wondered if there was any knowledge on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer, like to answer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Aldridge. So in terms of the advert applications, we can only look at residential amenity or visual amenity and highway safety. They're the 2 considerations for us on advert applications. So we wouldn't have any wildlife assessment. What I would say is obviously it is a town centre location, so there is already quite an amount of illumination there already. So I think it would be unlikely to impact wildlife, but we could impose an informative or something like that if you wanted us to, just to make the applicant aware to investigate the or protect the signs from birds nesting.
Thank you. So, yeah, that would be fine. If it was possible, it would be nice if we could just put a small note on that. That would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Okay. I don't have indication that there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, so it's open to the floor. Does anyone wish to discuss the item? Councillor Rimmer?
No, just to say it's perfectly normal for a new operator to want to replace the signage of the previous potential occupant with their own signage to advertise it as a new exciting venture for the town centre. Pigeons are a problem, I believe, in that area, so maybe some pigeon deterrence measures around the sign would be a good idea. Obviously, Brook House suffers from that and had to put in pigeon deterrence measures as well. So very sound questions on that. But with an open mind, I will be backing this one and approving it. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to comment? No, I think it's a fairly minor application, but it's come to us because it is a council building that this signage has to go on. I don't think there is any real reason to object to it personally, and nobody else has indicated that. So I think we'll go straight to the conclusion and recommendation. The recommendation to be found on page 178 is that application number 24/00080/ABAS be granted advertisement consent subject to the conditions set out below. And there are 5 conditions, all on page 178. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour? Plus the informatives. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move on to item 4 on the agenda. This is application 22/01097/full, and it starts on page 17, not 19 as indicated on page 2. So I'm now going to hand over to Ms. Cook to present when she's settled. Thank you, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the conversion, redevelopment and extension of the existing building at Reeds, 66 Lane Road in Billericay, to form a 3rd storey and the construction of a new 3-storey residential apartment building to provide a total of 32 residential apartments or flats, and associated access works, parking, refuse, drainage, landscaping and other infrastructure works. As you recall, or most of you recall, the application was deferred from the previous planning committee meeting in order for officers to seek an amended bin store location, which has now been received. So we have amended plans, which I'll explain further on. So the site is located on the western side of Langdon Road at its junctions with Quilters Drive, to the south of Billericay High Street and a town centre. Immediate to the west and the east of the site are residential properties, with Quilters Drive leading from, as I say, its junction, Langdon Road. The site is located within the Billericay Conservation Area and is identified as a building of local interest, also known as a non-designated heritage asset. That's the aerial view of the site itself, and the extent of the parking that lies behind it to the west. And some photographs of the site. So they're from the junction facing south. You can see Quilters Drive there on the bottom picture, a bit clearer. Flicking through again, the top photograph is the picture of the building from the northern side, the extent of the car park on the southern side. And you can see there the rear of the building, part of which was damaged by a fire approximately 2 years ago. And again, you can see the rest of the car park with residential properties behind it, the access to the site, which remains the same. And then we're just turning round, you can see more of the residential properties in Quilters. And the photograph on the right-hand side shows the extent of the rear boundary or the southern boundary of the site. can see the fire damaged part of the building on the left-hand side, and then the access there which leads round to the fold and the children's nursery and the parking. So there's a right of way that runs through that car park leading to that part of the site. So in terms of the proposed development, as I said before, it's for 32 flats which are split over 2 separate blocks. The main building is proposed to be extended, and a new detached block will be located within the existing car park at the rear. 32 car parking spaces are proposed, with 39 secure parking, cycle parking spaces. The existing access, as I say, remains the same, but it will be widened. The new bin store will be created within the undercraft area, so this is the amended area, so I'll show that on the plans further on. And we've got new landscaping works, 25 new trees are being proposed. All of the flats, with the exception of 2, will have their own balcony or terrace area, which range from 3 to 15 square metres in size. And I'll flick on to the next slide, which shows the proposal. So you've got the bottom of the screen, you've got the extended rear block and a detached block in the top right-hand corner there. So previously the proposed bin store was alongside number 1 Quilters Drive, approximately here, if you can see that cursor being shown there. So the bin store has now been relocated within the undercroft. So here you would have parking before. So people will be able to access that through the undercroft open area here. And that's, as I say, it's internal, so that's gated as such, but the bin store is all in that area. And parking replaces where the bin store was shown previously. The number of parking spaces hasn't changed. That's the same plan, but you can see the roof plan here of the two blocks itself. These are floor plans which show the front block. And the upper floors of the front block, and the roof plan there on the right hand side, and the rear block, so you'll see the bin store there on the left hand side plan. So as I say, that's within this undercroft area. They've been resited here, and the upper floors above, first floor, second floor on the left, roof plan there. Front block remains the same as you saw before. That's the back of the front block, so it's 3 stories overall, but the upper floor set within the roof space. And the rear block, so the bin store's behind this area here, so this entrance has been narrowed slightly to allow the wall to be pulled across to enclose the bin store, so that's the access at that point. And you can see that a little bit there on that front elevation. Rear stays the same, which is at the top, or the side, sorry. And you've got the refuse store here. Some visuals of the site. So this is looking down Quilters Drive. You've got the existing access there at the side of both pictures on the right-hand side. And then the top one is the back of the front block, facing into the car park. Similar sort of perspective really from the bottom image with the rear block in the background. Neighbouring property there on the side, just shaded in grey. Some of the flats will need screening to prevent overlooking of the children's play space at the nursery that's nearby. So we've managed to get sort of perspective there, or a CGI of those flats which will need that screening. They're set out in on one of the conditions. So these visuals haven't been updated, but you can see there on the top picture, the cars there are actually where the new bin store will be sited. So that, as I said, that opening has been reduced. And the bottom picture remains the same. This slide sets out the Section 106 infrastructure contributions. I won't go through them, I think they're self-explanatory. Just to point out, as I said before, that the application has submitted, or the applicant, sorry, has submitted a financial viability assessment, which has been independently reviewed at the applicant's expense, and that's concluded that affordable housing will be financially unviable. Therefore, no affordable housing is being sought. However, the council would apply early and late stage viability review mechanisms if permission was granted. And just to conclude that we consider that the proposed development is considered to be acceptable and significant weight should be afforded to the reuse of the main building, which is of historic importance, and the provision of much needed new homes to support identified needs for housing in a highly sustainable location. The public benefits of the proposal outweigh the low level of less than substantial harm that's been identified. The proposal will result in an effective use of land in an urban area, which is not considered to have a detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the area, the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, or have a detrimental impact upon highway safety or parking in the local area. Just to remind members of paragraph 124C of the NPPF, which states that planning decisions should give substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land within settlements for homes, and 142D, which goes on to add that decisions should promote and support the development of underutilised land and buildings, especially if this would help to meet identified needs for housing where land supply is constrained and available sites could be used more effectively. As I said before, the site is considered to be within a highly sustainable location, within close proximity of Billericay town centre and the High Street, and the government requires local authorities to make best use of previously developed land in such locations. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the completion of the Section 106 agreement and the conditions that are set out on pages on the new agenda. I can't tell you what they are off the top of my head, sorry, but you'll have those in front of you anyhow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Cook. They're on pages 25 to 36. Do any members of the committee wish to ask any questions on this application? Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One was to do with the colour scheme of the actual brick, because the CGI and the diagram looked darker, and this one looks a little bit lighter, more beige, so or sandy, I guess. So I just wanted to know what was the actual brick colour.
It's a red brick being put forward.
Okay.
With black banding as well going through to match what's on the existing building. So they're pulling that through. I don't know if some of the photographs will show that a bit clearer. We have got conditions on materials, so we would seek samples of the materials if agreed. Yeah, so basically it would match what's there. It's a bit hard to see on the photographs because the light, but you can see some of the banding going through the top of the gable, which would remain, and that will get pulled back through. But it's a red brick the main brick is red to match existing.
Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you. And it was one of the reasons I was asking, because obviously it is a conservation area, so it's quite important to understand that. Obviously, we were talking about the weight we must give in terms of sustainable locations. We're talking about a brownfield site being reused, talking about the historic building. I mean, these are all important aspects. I'm just wondering, is there any harm identified in respect of the conservation area itself from this application?
Yeah, so we have consulted with Place Services Heritage. Their comments are obviously in the main body of the report. We have concluded that the proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the designated heritage asset, which is the conservation area itself. It's a low level of less than substantial harm, so we have to then balance that against the public benefits that the proposal would create. So we've done that within the body, so 5.2.8 of the report, the first report, so the report that went to committee 2 weeks ago. So the public benefits here, we're talking about providing 32 new homes within a sustainable location, the retention of the existing building, seeing it, obviously the fire damage part being brought back into use. These are all what we consider to be public benefits. Obviously you've got the 106 contributions as well. In our mind, all of these benefits outweigh that low level of less of substantial harm that's been identified.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? No. Okay, we do have some members of the public wishing to address us, so I'm going to take us out of session. Officers, I believe we've got a written statement. Can we take that one first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this statement is from Mr McManus, number 1 Quilters Drive, who attended Planning Committee 2 weeks ago and spoke on this item. And he writes, unfortunately, due to business commitments, I'm unable to attend the committee meeting on this Wednesday, the 6th of March, regarding the planning application, to voice Jeanette and my support for the amended plans. I would like again to thank you and your planning department team, along with the councillors, for your efforts in resolving the issue with the initially proposed location of the bin store. I would also like to highlight the efforts of Warren Brodie, the developer, in resolving the issue in conjunction with you and your team. Given the now amended plans showing the relocation of the bin store away from our boundary wall at number 1 Quilters Drive, Billericay, we are very happy to support the planning application. I would very much appreciate your communication of Jeanette and my support for the planning application at the council meeting, please, and again apologise that we are unable to attend the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can we now take the remote representation from Mr Gibson? Okay, Mr Gibson, if you'd like to take yourself off of mute and tell us, give us your report, please. Thank you. Is anybody there? Mr Gibson? Okay, yeah, okay, so apparently we've got this one as a written report as well, so perhaps we'll ask officers if they can find that for us, please.
Yes, so this one reads, in respect of the Reeds building on Langdon Road, Billericay. Why are we even considering this 3-storey building in the Billericay conservation area? This area only has 2-storey houses, no 3-storey buildings. The 3-storey building at the end of the car park will face greenbelt land. There is a footpath along the side where you won't be able to see the original school building with bell tower. The building itself also shows to have another storey added to its side, and its ridge line is not being followed by the original height. Is this not a gross overdevelopment of this historic site, a bookend to Billericay Town in the Billericay Town Conservation Area? Thank you.
Thank you for reading that, Mr. Sweeney, yes. Okay, so we have one representation in person. Paul Rowland, are you available to come to the microphone, please? If you'd like to make yourself comfortable, and when you're ready, turn the microphone on. You'll have 3 minutes indicated by the traffic light system on the bench. Thank you.
Good evening, members. I'm Paul Rowland, a planning director at Savills, representing the Brodie Group, a Brentwood-based developer with a track record of turning consents into completions with their flagship developments at the Signal Yard and Marconi Radio Factory in Chelmsford. You considered and deferred our application from your last meeting for the sole reason that refuse store facilities would be unneighbourly. Since our application was deferred, we've negotiated a new refuse arrangement that has completely overcome our neighbours' objections and which meets your officer's approval. At a time when the green belt across Billericay, Pitsea and Wickford is under pressure, we ask for your permission to make the most of an underused brownfield site. We propose a harmonious design with traditional quality materials that reflect the character of Billericay. We feel our plan for new homes is much more in keeping than the former nightclub that was licensed to serve alcohol late into the night every week. Over the last 3 years, we've worked hard with your officers and our neighbours to get our proposals right. We're particularly pleased that Billericay Town Council do not object to our application. In response to advice, we reduced the number of homes proposed, and this allowed us to deliver a higher ratio of car parking spaces and increase the separation distance to preserve the privacy of our nearest neighbours. Every home will have a dedicated car parking space. There'll be extra spaces for visitor and delivery parking too. We have respected the historic importance of the old school and its position in the conservation area, proposing to revitalise the asset with a new, sympathetic, long-term use and causing the absolute minimum impact on the building itself. We've specified high levels of renewable energy that uses individual exhaust air heat pumps to provide heat and hot water to each individual flat. These are fitted in a cupboard inside each flat, thus avoiding noise and external plant, and their performance will easily exceed the building regulation requirements. Your officers agree the impact on outlook and separation are acceptable, and in terms of light and shadowing, our professional consultants have found no significant harm. Your housing need assessment identifies high demand for 1- and 2-bedroom homes, which we are proposing here. This will help youngsters to take their first step on the housing ladder. Our proposal represents a golden opportunity to revitalise a disused former nightclub that currently provides no value for the community. It is time to put the brownfield first when it comes to new homes, and we hope you'll take this opportunity tonight and vote for our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowland. Okay, members of the committee, I'm going to call Councillor Myers first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Obviously, after the deferral, there was a particular issue with the bin store, which I think we all felt was unacceptable to that particular resident's residential amenity, and I'm glad that that's been solved by the applicant. Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Lost my train of thought there for a second. Thank you. I think it's important that we realise that the building, as it was as a nightclub, creating excessive noise late at night, and the fire that happened many years ago. It used to be a building that I attended when I was a younger man. I still am a young man, sorry, but yes, but a younger man. Obviously, the fire devastated the site that was there, and it has laid derelict for some time. When I see the designs of this particular place on a brownfield site, sort of in keeping with the brick and the architecture of the building, the minimum number of the number of car parking spaces meets space standards, which you don't see a lot in apartments and flats very often. So I think that's quite a good aspect to it. It has its own communal garden. It has local amenities nearby. There's bus stops. It's very near to the town centre itself. In terms of its design, obviously the only particular issue I have is with I believe from the last committee, the 2 or 3 flats which were with the balconies obscured, overlooking the potentially children's play area. I mean, hopefully we could put an informative on that just to say that I know we have a condition, but whether or not how high those screens have to be in order to actually not be overlooked. If we could do that, then I have no particular issue with this application and reusing brownfield sites which have been laid derelict for a while, when we're desperately trying to protect as many greenbelt sites as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Councillor Blake?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify something. It wasn't the only reason why it got refused last time. We didn't get to discuss it last time. When the gentleman spoke regarding the refuse place, we stopped it there and then. So to make the comment, that was the only reason for it to be withdrawn then, or then it is not actually true, because we didn't actually speak on it. Just want to make that point clear. I'm glad that that's been resolved, but I do have a problem. I have a problem with the height of it. The 3 stories is the concern that I have. I think it looks unsightly, and that is a way. I'm not against the development now. Let's make that quite clear. I'm not, but I do have concerns about the way it looks compared to the other houses around it. So there is more than just one reason.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Rimmer?
Thank you, Chair. I think I had my first tequila slammer in that establishment when I was a younger man. But there we go. Yeah. In respect of this development, I do have some concerns in regard to the conservation area, but at some point we have to say, where are we going to build new homes? And I think it is a very powerful argument if we're trying to protect the green belt and our nature and wildlife, but actually an establishment which was a nightclub and probably causing a bit of a nuisance to residents at the time, whether it was Alex or myself at the establishment, is probably better replaced by a residential area where actually it's more in keeping with that area. It is a shame it's 3 stories, but that's what we've got in front of us. I don't think that's a killer point for me in terms of this application. The brickwork is sympathetic. They've made reasonable adjustments in respect of where the refuse bin store area is going, and I think on the whole, I find myself finding no reason to go against this. I think it's a good reuse. And is probably going to do something to actually keep a historic building going as well. So on the whole, based on the weighting we give to this in terms of the heritage asset and it being less than substantial harm, I'm going to have to go with the recommendation on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Schrader?
Well, eons ago, I went there as well, but when I was a younger man, it was so long ago, it would take an archaeologist to find evidence of it, I suspect. I think the point that Councillor Myers makes around this being a brownfield development and we're trying to conserve Greenbelt is a strong argument, well made. My issue with this application is wholly around the conservation area. And it's very clear from the report, both the renewed report and the original, that officers have worked with the applicant to amend the design and scale of the extension. And clearly the applicant has engaged constructively in that process, so I make no criticism there. But Place Services, the heritage officer at County, still clearly thinks it's too big, and I'm minded to agree. Although I acknowledge that it's much improved, nobody seems to dispute the harm to the conservation area and the non-designation heritage asset, which dates back to 1878. So this harm is less than substantial, but it's harm nonetheless. And as it says on page 52 at the bottom, overall, it is still considered that the proposal would not preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. And those are the words that are ringing around in my mind, because the whole point in designating a conservation area is surely to ensure that we are taking opportunities to enhance and preserve the historic and aesthetic quality of that area and the heritage assets that are contained within it. The whole reason that we designated that area a conservation area was because we recognised that Billericay High Street had a number of attractive qualities. It had a number of heritage assets that we wanted to maintain, and anyone who drives up and down Billericay High Street will know that it also has a number of frankly quite hideous sort of 1960s, 70s infill buildings that went up before we designated it a conservation area, which detract massively from the quality of the conservation area. And that's why we have the conservation area status, and that has allowed us to take some opportunities to improve. And I think if one looks at, say, the Costa Coffee building, which was renovated a few years ago, that has been completely transformed. It was a horrible, ugly, flat-roofed building, and it has now been transformed into something that is far more sympathetic to the conservation area, and I think massively enhances it. There have also been missed opportunities, and Councillor Brand knows exactly what I'm going to mention, which is the Link House, which had a refurb a number of years ago, and I objected very strenuously to these glass and steel roof structures that were put in, which I was assured would not be visible from the street, but they are, and they look horrible. So we have a real checkered history with the conservation area in terms of standing up for it and actually making it work. So it seems to me that we're being asked to accept harm, albeit less than substantial. And it just raises the question with me, are we serious about this conservation area, or should we just get rid of it, just drop it? If we're not bothering to uphold it, what's the point in having it? Now, I recognise the wider benefits of the scheme, and I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to completely chuck my toys out the pram, but it does irk to vote for a scheme in the conservation area that doesn't enhance or contribute positively to it. And that is something that I'm going to have great difficulty in overcoming. Otherwise, I don't have many objections to the scheme. I just don't understand why we're accepting less than substantial harm when we should be accepting no harm, and we should be requiring applications in the conservation area to enhance and contribute positively to it. That's my view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schrader. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Schrader says that this doesn't contribute positively to the area. Obviously, the current building there has no roof because of a fire and is no use to anybody at all. So I can't see why some members would rather have a burnt out old building that's never going to be used by anybody ever again over something that can be used to house residents in our borough. But yeah, it's a brownfield site. It's close to the town centre. It's got plenty of amenities. The current building's in disrepair. The residents of One Quarters Drive are satisfied with the moving the bins, which, if I'm honest, I also agree with it. The new site for the bins is much better than the previous site. I'm not sure why it wasn't there in the first place. It seems the most logical place to put those bins. And always has. So yeah, I'm happy that the bins have been put in a more suitable place. And yeah, I was minded to vote for it last time before it was deferred, and I'm even happier with it now because the bins have been moved.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Anyone else wishing to speak on this application? Councillor Schrader, wish to come back?
Well, if I could just come back very briefly, just to point out to Councillor Harrison that there were 27 objections to this application. So although the neighbour that came last time is happy, and I'm pleased for him, there are at least 26 other local residents who are not happy. And I just think it's worth making that point. And the fact that the current burnt out building doesn't contribute positively to the conservation area is not and has never been in dispute. It's a question of what replaces it, and whether what replaces it should contribute positively or should be allowed to less than substantially harm it.
Very succinctly put, Councillor Schrader. I would like to... I'll call Councillor Moore.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chairman. After some of the comments, I think I would just like to remind the committee that the building became Quilter's Bar in the late 1990s, and then it turned into the Ivory Rooms, and its final incarnation was as Reed. As Reed's, the bar and restaurant was an entertainment venue with tribute acts plus dinner and or endless Prosecco and bouncers on the doors. It offered 3, and I quote, smart bars, including a beamed gallery and an eclectic 2-level restaurant with booths. At weekends, residents had to put up with the bar closing at 2 in the morning and the resultant noise of people leaving by car or walking to the high street. Residents of Laindon Road and Quilter's Drive were frustrated with parked cars in the street, which yellow line restrictions did nothing to prevent. This finally came to an end in August 2019, when a 34-year-old from Wickford was found unconscious in the middle of Laindon Road after being attacked outside Reed's. The man, who was from Wickford, was rushed to hospital where he died 9 days after the attack. This incident, the pandemic and a major fire in 2022 spelt the beginning of the end for Reed's. And here we are today looking at the redevelopment of the building into residential accommodation. And I'm glad that the historic section of the building will be converted and extended to provide 17 flats. The front elevation facing Laindon Road would remain similar to the existing, and the existing bell tower and steep front gable projection would remain. As far as local residents, Madam Chairman, are concerned, the loss of the building as an entertainment venue is a big plus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Brown?
Councillor Moore made some of the points I wish to make, so I'm not going to repeat them. What I would say is I understand and I share Andy's concerns when it comes to the conservation area, and we've often agreed on those things in the past. I think it's worth pointing out the fact that we do have down Laindon Road a block of flats. 2 doors down from me, there's a large block of flats there that was passed on appeal, and that block of flats has not caused the issues that some councillors at the time were concerned about. I would say that obviously for residents, it is always a concern when we're thinking about the conservation area, because that's what makes Billericay what it is, those buildings and the way in which we protect them. And Andy's right that, you know, something that built in 1878 isn't going to come around again. But what this enables us to do is to continue to use that building for a new purpose. If we don't use our heritage buildings and we don't keep them in good repair, they are going to be lost. By this development coming forward, we are able to retain that asset. And as Councillor Moore has said, the front is going to look the way it does now. We're going to keep the bell tower. The things that make it distinctive are still going to be there. I would also say that when we're looking at the NPPF, it's really important that we follow that legislation. And the advice there is that if there is less than substantial harm, we need to consider the benefits to our community. And I think many councillors have already outlined those in terms of additional housing, bringing a site back into use, and also, you know, on this way, although it's not a planning consideration really, taking away some of the problems that residents faced in that area from antisocial behaviour and what comes with having a nightclub on your doorstep. I have no issues whatsoever in supporting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Unfortunately, with the amount of damage done to that building, it'd be extremely difficult to conserve it in any particular useful way other than what is proposed here. Now, I will point out to some members that just because this is proposed to be 3 stories, there are other buildings in the conservation area that are 3 stories. Elizabeth Cottage, for instance, and the new building on Sun Corner. So, you know, that in itself is really not a relevant point, I would say. And, you know, as already been pointed out, this is providing homes for the next generation, some of whom are probably in the room at the moment. And we do need to do that somewhere. Brownfield is the only place really that we can do it, because we don't want to do it on Greenfield. And then there's the town centre tower blocks at 17 stories, and we're arguing about something that's 3 stories. I really do not see that we should be turning this down. So unless anyone else wishes to come back, I'm going to put this to the vote. The recommendation can be found on page 25 of the agenda. And it reads that planning application number 22/01097/FUL be granted planning permission subject to the completion of a 106 agreement to secure financial contributions towards public realm improvements, monitoring existing on-street parking controls, sustainable transport, healthcare, open space, culture, play and sports provision, and the local delivery pilot and employment and skills early and late stage viability review of the proposal, monitoring fees, payment of the local planning authority's professional and legal fees associated with the completion of the S106 legal agreement, which are set out in section 5.13 of the committee report, and subject to the conditions set out at the end of the report, with any amendments that might be necessary up to the issue of the decision notice. And the conditions, as already stated, are on pages 25 to 36, together with the informatives. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of that proposal, please? Thank you. That's 9 in favour. Those against? 2. Thank you. That's all 11. Okay, so we'll now move on to the final application of the evening.
Sandy's got to leave.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give us members who wish to leave for various reasons or go to the facilities. I'll give you until 8:10 by that clock.
I'm a tenner now. I'm a tenner now.
Why?
What's that been done by now?
Well, yeah, you ought to know better than that.
Oh, well, it's done now, and then I'm on 60 quid a weekend. Every word, isn't it? Only about timings.
Cheetham Gibson is now exiting.
Chairs go up when you stand up, and I've got my hand caught. Yes. Right. We'll try and get the Keith. We'll try and get Keith Reynolds to come on first when we do the speeches.
I'm on mute.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the planning meeting. We're going to move on to item, what is item 5 of our agenda, which is application 23/00517/FUL. And I'm going to move over to Mr. Humphreys to present to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, this application relates to an application at 97 Chapel Street in Billericay. It's for the demolition of an existing dwelling house and the construction of a pair of semi-detached houses. The application was presented to committee on the 11th of October last year, and it was subsequently deferred so that officers could seek further information from the heritage officers at Essex County Council's Place Services, as it was unclear if the heritage officer had seen the site of the most recent building structure reports submitted by the applicant in relation to the application. I'll just run through the slides for the scheme, so just to familiarise everyone with the application. The site is within the Billericay Conservation Area. This one is on the east side of Chapel Street. There's the site, edged red there. It comprises a late Victorian, early Edwardian red brick villa. The dwelling itself is not on the statutory list of buildings of architectural or historic interest in its own right, but it would be regarded as a non-designated heritage asset. It's been vacant for some time, in excess of a decade. I think the applicant advises up to 18 years. It was purchased by the applicant in January 2021. The current application follows 2 unsuccessful applications and appeals to redevelop the wider site for 5 dwellings. A single dwelling application was subsequently approved for the former builder's yard element at the back of the site, known as 95 Chapel Street. So there's the site with the red star. You've got the United Reformed Church to the south or right there, and the doctor's surgery at 93 Chapel Street to the north, BT telephone exchanges to the west. Here's some photos of the building. As you can see, it's in a poor condition. Suffers from extensive some damp, mould issues. This, as you can see, there's some internal photos. There's further photos provided in the reports that are provided, and I'll run through those shortly. Just showing some of the issues. So that's the site at present. That's the proposed plan. So there's a demolition of existing, proposed erection of a pair of 7 detached houses, as you can see there. So existing elevations. These are the proposed elevations. The applicants have sought to try to replicate elements of the existing Edwardian style building in the form, materials, traditional features, etc., as you can see, but as a pair of dwellings rather than one. There's the rear elevation and north side. Here's a comparison between the existing and proposed. Comparison of the floor plans, ground floor, existing and proposed. First floor, existing and proposed. Some 3D visuals. It would have a small area crown roof. Material details, as I mentioned, that's seeking to sort of replicate the existing sort of red brick slates, timbers, sash windows, and this is the existing and proposed street scene. So the application was initially presented in October with a recommendation of approval. As I mentioned, at that committee it was unclear whether the Heritage Officer's response or it was unclear whether from the Heritage response at that time whether they'd seen sight of the most recent structural reports, as they weren't referred to in their response. Since then, the application was deferred. Following this, officers engaged further with Heritage officers at Essex County Council's Place Services, who advised that they maintained an objection to the development due to insufficient justification for demolition, but would be guided by the further advice of an independent conservation engineer. The Moulton Partnership had previously been commissioned by the Council to undertake a desktop-only study, and this preceded the current structural and redevelopment cost appraisal reports submitted by the applicants. The Council asked the Heritage Officer at Place Services to therefore commission an independent conservation engineer, CTP Consulting Engineers, to inspect the interior and exterior of the building on site with the consent of the applicant and to produce an independent report on the condition of the building and comment on the reports previously submitted by the applicant to provide a baseline on which the current application could be assessed. This, however, took some time. I appreciate that it was deferred in October, it's now March. This took time to procure due to the limited number of conservation accredited registered engineers available to undertake a review locally. They were subsequently commissioned and reviewed the property in February of this year. The engineer's report is provided at enclosure number 3. The conservation engineer concluded that the building is in a reasonable structural condition, notwithstanding the photos provided and showing evidence of mould and other elements, and may be retained, that the roof has not been leaking severely and the timber floors are generally sound, and that there is no evidence to recommend wholesale replacement of the timber structure. The report advises that works noted earlier in the report should be allowed for in assessing the cost of repair, particularly replacing roof finishes, rebuilding chimneys above ridge line, replacement ceilings, etc. They also considered earlier reports submitted by the applicant but disagreed with several of their findings. The report presented to the committee on the 11th of October 2023 recommended on balance that the application should be approved. Now, this was on the basis that the building was considered beyond repair at that time based on the reports that were submitted with the application, and because the intended replacement dwelling sought to closely replicate the style of the original building, incorporating traditional features lost from the current structure. It would also make a more efficient reuse of an underused urban site, including the provision of 2 much-needed homes on brownfield land in an urban area to modern standards that would contribute to the borough's housing supply. On balance, it was therefore recommended that planning permission be granted in order to secure a viable long-term use of the site to preserve the wider conservation area. However, having regard to the latest findings of the conservation accredited registered engineers report, who are a specialist conservation engineer in this field, it is identified that the building is not in such a poor condition that it could not be retained and sympathetically repaired through less remedial works than initially identified by the applicants. The balance in the assessment of the application therefore falls more in favour of the retention of the structure. Given this new baseline, notwithstanding the similar design features proposed within the new pair of dwellings, the loss of an inherent architectural and historic interest within the existing Edwardian-style building arising from its complete loss in demolition would result in less than substantial harm to the conservation area that was not considered outweighed by the public benefits, and therefore the scheme would fail to preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area. Place Services Heritage Officer confirms they have read the report submitted, supports the conservation engineer's conclusions and objects to the demolition of the building and the replacement building proposed. Having regard to the advice now provided by the independent conservation engineer and Place Services Heritage Officer, it is put forward that there is no clear and convincing justification for the demolition and replacement of the building, notwithstanding its poor condition, as it is identified as making a positive contribution to the conservation area and is a non-designated heritage asset in its own right. Notwithstanding the harm resulting from the demolition of the building, the proposed replacement building would result in the loss of heritage significance from the site due to its design, which the Heritage Officer advises would not preserve the existing archaeological, architectural and historic interest. The proposal, therefore, is not considered to preserve or enhance the character of or appearance of the conservation area, contrary to Section 72 of the Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act, and would result in less than substantial harm to the area's significance and the total loss of significance of a non-designated heritage asset. The loss of the building is not considered, therefore, outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme. In light of this additional information, notwithstanding the previous approval recommendation, it is therefore recommended on balance that the application be refused planning permission for the reasons set out on page 107 of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Humphreys. Do any members of the committee wish to ask any questions? Councillor Rimmer.
Apologies, Chair, and I do read reports. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Just to clarify, in terms of the weight that should be given, in respect of this loss of, you've got two losses there. Obviously, you've got the less than substantial harm to the area, that's right, and a separate loss, which is the total loss of significance. We say that's the highest level of loss in respect of a heritage asset when we're assessing these things.
Yeah, the loss of the building is more significant for the loss of a non-designated, but bearing in mind it's a non-designated heritage asset, but that's at the higher end of the harm to a non-designated heritage asset is its total loss, yeah.
Councillor Rimmer.
And just, sorry, reflecting on this, and you're still on at the moment, by the way, just reflecting on this, and the MPPF and what weight it would actually give to a total loss of a non-designated asset, and in balance the benefit of having, in effect, two homes.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct, Councillor. It is a balancing exercise. I mean, if I just read out section, paragraph 209 of the MPPF, states that the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application. In weighing applications that directly or indirectly affect non-designated heritage assets, a balanced judgment will be required having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. It's very much measuring the significance of the asset and the scale of the harm. In this case, I mean, the conservation area officer has advised that there is there is architectural and historic interest within the current building, notwithstanding it's not a designated heritage asset in its own right. It's a traditional building dating from the late Victorian period that contributes to the character of the conservation area.
Okay, Councillor Rimmer?
Yes, I guess so.
Does anyone else wish to ask any questions? No. Okay. Now I'm going to take us out of the session. We have 8 people wishing to speak, so I will be asking that when you speak, you do so succinctly. And if someone's already mentioned what you want to mention, I'd rather you didn't repeat it. Thank you. I'm going to start off with Keith Reynolds, who is online. Mr. Reynolds, if you'd like to unmute yourself and address the committee. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I hope you can hear me and the remainder of the committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in respect to this scheme. The application before you was brought to committee. Be able to? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We're trying to deal with the problem for you. Just a moment.
Can you hear us, Mr. Reynolds?
Certainly can, yes.
Do you want to try speaking, Mr. Reynolds?
Can you hear me now? That's fine. I don't know whether you can hear me yet.
Do you want to try speaking?
Yep, can you continue? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear myself, if that's of any consequence.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep, okay, hopefully you can hear me now. I was just offering whether I should send my my note to you to be read out if you couldn't hear me. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Madam Chairman and the committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak in regard to this scheme. The application before you was brought to committee some 21 weeks ago with a recommendation from the planner for approval. Sadly, due to the uncertainty of one of the consultees and the review of the information, the application was stalled. It was recommended that a further external consultant report be procured to offer comment on the structural stability of the property. After some 4 months of waiting, a report was produced which sadly is flawed, the reasons being set out in the evidence-backed responses you have seen in the last few days. Due to the council's internal process, this flawed report has led to the planner to having to rewrite his recommendation to that of approval, something that I'm sure he's not entirely happy with. The property itself sits within a conservation area, but is not a designated asset itself, insofar as the English heritage is concerned. Whilst there have been some details of the existing property highlighted as being of some relevance in the conservation area, these details are not overriding precedents to require the refusal of the development on the redevelopment of this site. In the Conservation Officer's response, they noted that they'd actually not read in full all of the documents forwarded to them. The main one being that the financial implications in the attempt to retain the existing property. Thus, they have failed to take note of the issue of that is incumbent in this matter. Financial viability is a matter that one has to be taken into account, along with the social and economic benefits for the wider area. The latter is an important one to note, as the 1st of this month the High Court made a reference to such matters when overturning the Secretary of State decision regarding the Oxford Street Marks and Spencer store, stating that in such cases, favour should be given to redevelopment where clear justification in terms of financial, social and economic betterment or benefit can be demonstrated, and in this case you get a betterment to the street scene, not only the above items. Surely it would be better to have two properties rather than see a dilapidated, structurally and financially unviable building remain unoccupied. This is clearly something the planner previously agreed with. I would therefore ask the committee to approve the scheme based on actual facts, as in our engineer's report and that of the building control officer stated back in 2021, rather than the information contained within what we consider to be a flawed report. And that concludes my items.
Thank you. Would you like to put yourself back on mute? Right. Right, I'm going to call Mr. David Dadds to the microphone next. And you have 3 minutes from the moment you turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Good evening. It is important to conserve and enhance the historic environment of our town, Billericay. And the above application, as we know, is in the conservation area. In determining this planning application within a conservation area, the council, and therefore in turn this planning committee, must pay special attention to the desirability of preserving and enhancing the character and the appearance of the conservation area, section 72 of the 1990 Act. There will be a loss of inherent architectural and historical interest within the existing Edwardian building arising from its demolition, and therefore a failure to preserve and enhance the character or the appearance of the conservation area. It is my opinion that the council ought to consider listing the building or protecting it further from dilapidation. The community building or the asset, the environmental benefit, if its loss is irreplaceable, we should conserve it in an appropriate manner, and that it should be there for the benefit and enjoyment of community now and in the future. Harm is being caused to the building. We've just heard from the agent that there's a betterment of the street scene. But actually, if you look at the Google Maps, or members will be aware of this area that live locally, that actually prior to the requirement or acquiring of the site, actually it looked quite nice. Even though it wasn't occupied, it had a very good street scene. The change is for the worse, and it's inappropriate in relation to the current interventions. There's removing of the front brick wall, removing of an established and mature front garden. All that has been, in effect, done to cause harm. The council should require the owner, in my opinion, that the property should be kept safe, should keep the building safe, and also to make sure that it's either fenced off or require the owner to take steps to board it up so it is safe for everyone. In relation to the Public Health Act, it could require the owner to remove the waste from the area in the front garden, and also to take steps to make sure the amenity of the area is not, and the building is not falling into disrepair. The owners should, in effect, be addressing the unsightly land and the appearance of the building under the Building Act. We don't want, and I think the problem is that we may start getting a very small crooked house situation that we've got elsewhere in the country. We mustn't have builders like the Elizabeth Cottage putting buildings into disrepair, knocking down, making it look unsightly so as to get their wish. We must preserve our conservation area. We should look after our historic buildings. That's why, otherwise we will lose our history, and we need to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dadds. I'm now going to call Joy Jarvis to the microphone.
Good evening, members. It has been 21 weeks since I was last here on the 11th of October. In my opinion, Place Services have been belligerent, not giving any weight to Gordon Humphrey's request for a site visit and did in fact write to say on the 19th of December that our application is lacking in justification. They only acted when Christine Lyons became involved after our Zoom meeting on the 11th of January. They then found a heritage surveyor to attend on the 1st of February. The surveyor attended the site ill-prepared, without steps, ladder, and most importantly, a moisture meter, instead giving his opinions by prodding the structure with a timber rod he picked up in the building. Indeed, at the beginning of his report, he himself states that most of the report cannot be relied upon because he did not properly inspect the building. He has also ignored reports from other departments which do not align with what appears to be his pre-decided narrative. As you will know, a senior Basildon building control officer examined the building back in 21 when we purchased it and concluded that the property had suffered severe leaks, suffers from significant mould, damp and fungal growth in every room, on the floor, walls and ceiling. My structural engineer had moisture readings taken in the building last week, 22nd of February, and these show without a doubt that the building is saturated. You can see from the photographs attached to the JBL engineer's rebuttal, water damage on the wallpaper that is falling off the walls and photos of severe fungal infestation. We all know that a derelict building does not self-heal after a period of 2.5+ years. On attending the last committee meeting, it would appear that some members were trying to refer to the similarities between 97 and Elizabeth Cottage and implying that Elizabeth Cottage was saved as a single-family home. But this was in fact granted permission to be changed into a development of 7 apartments and was treble the size due to viability concerns. Indeed, the intent was only to save the front facade. However, this was rebuilt after falling down during construction. Viability has not been a consideration with 97 Chapel Street. I need to point out that there is no institution in the country that will lend to refurbish this property, as has been proven by the Leslie Clark reports. It is not a viable proposition and would leave the property in equity. I've been building in Billericay since the 80s and could not in good conscience let a family inhabit this house, especially with the minor amount of works that is suggested in the CTP report. It would not even pass building control regulations, with the possibility of damage to their health, with the amount of damp and fungus in the property. As you all know, damp and mould are killers. I would gratefully request you support this application. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ms Jarvis. I would now like to call Mr Christopher Lay. Once again, you have 3 minutes from the time you turn the microphone on, Mr Lay.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I am a neighbour of 97 Chapel Street. I must admit, not a near neighbour, but a neighbour, and have been so for the last 50 years. I used to know, in fact, one of the original owners of that house, so I'm quite well aware of the property. I must say that I applaud the council planning officers for the significance placed upon the conservation area and this property's location within it. It's good to know that the town centre's historical heritage is well respected and conserved. I totally agree with the recommendation to refuse planning permission. It's pointless having a conservation area if we don't conserve buildings within it. Regarding respect for this particular historical heritage asset, I wish to share the concern I have for the risk of rapid decline and arson of the structure. Currently, there is no significant fencing protecting it. One of the first actions of the current owners, was that the front garden brick wall was knocked down. The result being that the front of the plot, from the pavement to the house wall, is currently used as an unofficial public car park. The windows were smashed by recent intruders. They remain broken and open to the elements. A solution that I respectfully suggest is that the council apply an urgent works notice to the property under section 54 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. That urgent work requirement being approved security fencing together with repair to windows and roof tiles. I believe that Section 76 of this Act allows it to be applied to non-listed buildings in a conservation area. If required, costs could be charged back to the owners. Thank you. That's all I wish to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lay. If you could turn the microphone off, please. Thank you very much. Right, I'm now going to call Russell Jarvis. Mr. Jarvis, you also have 3 minutes from the time you turn the microphone on.
Hello, committee members. Yeah, my name's Russell Jarvis. I'm Joy's son. I regularly visit the site. I just wanted to first say, sorry, I don't appreciate the reference to Crooked House, which implies that we're somehow breaking the law, as Mr. Dad was trying to imply there, by this house falling into disrepair and vandals breaking into it. It is none of our doing. I attend the site every other day. I go around the back. Usually they break in around there. I have had to shoo people out of there on several occasions. I have been assaulted by youths who are in there taking drugs, marijuana and what have you. There's NOS canisters scattered throughout. We've had to clear up needles. There was at one point a vagrant who set fire to the place trying to cook. This is what the fire brigade reported to us. And they actually did say that the only reason the whole place didn't burn down is because it is so damp. In regard to the hoarding, this is something we did offer to do, but the police told us not to. They said that to hoard up the front of the site would mean that, because they're going to drive by more regularly because the amount of times we reported stuff there, to hoard it off would mean that they wouldn't be able to see what was going on. So, respectively, we haven't done that. In regard to the front wall, that was only taken down with consultation with planning because it was unsafe. There was roots growing all throughout it. Eventually, it was going to fall over on someone. And again, we offered to fence in the site. Police, again, advised not to. As far as everything else, I mean, it's continuous breakings. The place is a nightmare. It is unsightly. It was only just last week. Apparently, no one noticed that a van parked up outside. They went in round the back. They've taken all the copper out of it, taken the boiler, and even taken the gas meter off the side of the building now. But we've secured the gas pipes so that they shouldn't be an issue. But again, it is absolutely relentless what is happening here. We just want to move on. We want to redevelop it into family homes that are usable. And unfortunately, until a viable option is approved by this committee, there's nothing it can do but sit empty. That is the end of it. We can't redevelop it because no one is going to want to move into a 5-bedroom house, which is going to be, you'd have to sell it for a hell of a lot of money, opposite a BT hub station with a bus stop out the front. No one is going to want to do that. But a smaller family home is a very viable option for people. And obviously what wants to be retained and left as a 4 or 5-bedroom house is not anymore, especially in between a church and a doctor's surgery that's been tripled in size. Thank you.
Could you turn the microphone off, please? Thank you very much, Mr. Jarvis. I'm now going to call Mr. Reginald O'Neill, please. Right, Mr. O'Neill, you have 3 minutes from the time that you turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Reading the planning application, I asked myself questions related to a conservation area. The particular building of its importance. In the Ordnance Survey map of 1874, there are no buildings there, there's just the church. This is the first building that was built on that site. I have 105 Chapel Street, and again, it doesn't feature in 1874. These are locally significant buildings, perhaps county significance because of the age of Billericay. Do they have a national significance or, by extension, international significance because of the Mayflower connection and the fact that it's a heritage site? Quite likely. The current owners have played a long game with this property, and by willful neglect, it's well degraded from the time they took it over. They took away the non-invasive bay tree that wasn't affecting that wall. I've got photographs of the wall. Having taken away the bay tree, then the wall disappears. That whole site's leveled, so people are using it as a car park. Prior to Christmas, and all over the Christmas period and New Year, the side was left completely open. They have builders fencing there. It was just left completely open, as if it was an open invitation. And of course, there was a mysterious fire in November 1993, or 2023, and attended by the fire brigade, of course, that doused the place with water. And not surprisingly, with the windows left broken and with fire brigade intervention, you've got a saturation effect in the property. The total site and 95 sold for 750,000. If the council want to consider compulsory purchase, I'll support that. I'd like to see the committee serve a preservation notice on the building so that it stops its further deterioration and complete loss. And perhaps an independent heritage survey would include my property as well in that site, because it seems to have been neglected with their heritage survey. And I think that a lot could be done to preserve this building, and I think it would be beneficial for Billericay and the importance of Billericay's conservation zone. Why do we have a conservation zone? And do we need to remove a building that's part of that and has been as the first building on site? So please ignore the noise about the cost of renovating it, especially from professional builders. Everybody else in Chapel Street is renovating their properties. The doctors have renovated theirs. The manse on the other side of the street near Waitrose, that's being renovated. That hasn't been knocked down. And everybody else can seem to renovate theirs. These builders knew what they were buying when they bought that property. It wasn't something that was a surprise.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Neill. Could you turn the microphone off before you leave? Thank you. That's lovely. Right, I have now got Christine Green. Once again, Ms. Green, you have 3 minutes as indicated by the traffic lights, and that will start from the time you turn the microphone on. Thank you.
I'm really sorry, I'm hearing impaired, and I've struggled to hear anything this evening, so I didn't realise the environment would be the sound.
Yeah. Can you?
Thank you. Is that all you were asking me? Okay, so well, I'm just a resident of Billericay. I'm Christine Green. I've lived in Billericay for more than 50 years, and for many of those years, Chapel Street was my GP surgery. So it's fair to say I've seen this house many times. I walk past there regularly and at least every week and more when visiting Waitrose and so on. I'm struggling to understand why, if this is the case, because I can't really hear, the planning department might see fit to object to demolishing this very unattractive and not, as I understand it, it's a non-listed building. Apologies if I've got that wrong. This house has never been an attractive building, even when lived in and cared for. The environment is currently generally unattractive, surrounded as it is by a hodgepodge of commercial use, including BT and Royal Mail opposite. Then there's the overextended building of the GP practice on one side, the church and the dental practice on the other side, and the bus stop directly outside. So my view is that 2 smaller family homes with the benefit of providing more affordable housing opportunities for 2 families, not 1, seems a much more sensible approach. And in my opinion, replacing this house with 2 attractive and stylish Edwardian semi-detached houses will significantly enhance the visual, not detract from it. I just ask the planning committee to consider my opinion during their decision making, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green. Can I finally call Mr. Roberts? And you also have 3 minutes from the time you turn the microphone on.
Good evening, committee. My name's Seb Roberts, and I've lived at 71 Chapel Street for 26 years. House of similar age, but of more modest styling than the property discussed. My interest and concern is on the preservation, restoration, and enhancement of our conservation area, and to ensure that buildings of this distinct vernacular are saved in our little enclave. After all, there's so few houses of this age in Billericay. Surely we have to look after the remaining ones we have. So I wish to object again to the developer's plans, and here is why. So if we cut through the gargantuan pile of in-depth reports which have been commissioned to prove that this building is structurally unsound and beyond recovery, we instead find that estimates are wildly inflated and the house is structurally sound. There's absolutely no necessity or merit in demolishing this building and cramming in some new boxes in its place, nor is there any merit in converting this into 2 semi-detached houses. It is a detached house, and a detached house it should remain. I would like to, I think there's been a fair amount of comment about conservation areas and the serious considerations that we should all actually place on conservation areas. Otherwise, what's the point of having them? So I put it to you that the conservation area, the public and our local heritage is much better served by the restoration of this building rather than converting it into a pair of semis. Fundamentally, this is a normal sized plot. It's not a vast plot for one family house. And what this house needs is a full renovation with tasteful extensions to provide a living space for the 21st century. The committee needs to dismiss this application, and if the developer is not interested in doing the work, then the committee needs to urge the developer to move on and actually make this property available on the open market so that somebody can be given the chance into turning it into the family house that it deserves to be. I've absolutely no doubt that there will be plenty of people, despite the significant amount of money and effort in restoring this building, in actually moving this forward, because it's in a great location. And I think basically there'd be a stampede of people interested in taking this on. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that is all the speakers I have on this item. So I'm going to call the committee back into session, and I'm sure they all have had something to think about from all the things that the audience has said. Before anyone starts to speak, can I just ask one of the officers to comment on the statement that was made about the financial considerations of the building, and whether that we should or should not be taking that into consideration, please?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I mean, the financial viability, I mean, it's a consideration, but the primacy is under the Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act, which seeks to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area. So whilst it feeds into that, the heritage objectives sort of take lead over the financial side, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I have got a number of members wishing to speak. I will call Councillor Moore first. Apparently.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As we've heard, 97 Chapel Street is a 2-storey red brick detached Edwardian villa constructed between the late 19th century and early 20th century. In the context of the street scene, one can see Rose Hall, which was built in 1850, and the terraced cottages opposite 97 Chapel Street were built around 1849. The historic United Reformed Church, next door to the application site, was built in 1838. And we should remember that the planning inspector, in his decision on an appeal on a different scheme by the same applicant in July 2022, stated that the building was of sufficient historic interest to be considered a non-designated heritage asset. The current proposal before us tonight would result in the total loss of the existing building at 97 Chapel Street, a building of townscape merit and a non-designated heritage asset that contributes to the character and appearance of the Billericay Conservation Area. The loss of the Edwardian Villa would have a negative effect on the character and appearance of the conservation area. The effect of this planning application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be carefully considered by us in determining the application. In my view, demolition would result in significant harm to the character and appearance of the street scene and would be harmful to the overall setting of a non-designated heritage asset, thereby failing to preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the Billericay Conservation Area. The very forceful arguments from the heritage officer at Essex County Council does not support the demolition of the existing building and the proposed replacement buildings which he advised would not preserve the character or appearance of the conservation area. This objection is supported by a very comprehensive report on the structure of the existing building. I know the planning officer has spent a considerable amount of time over the last couple of years looking at this property and the various planning applications that have come forward, and I thank him for a full and comprehensive report tonight. The planning committee needs to look at this application very carefully and to give substantial weight to the potential loss of a historic asset that, despite its current condition, makes a positive contribution to the Billericay Conservation Area, and if renovated, would make an exceptional contribution to the conservation area. We managed to save Elizabeth Cottage at 4 High Street, Billericay, in 2016, which had been neglected for many years. Elizabeth Cottage was also identified as a building of townscape value in the conservation area character appraisal, and a sympathetic development of the cottage, retaining many of its original features, shows us that it is possible to take what at the time was a wreck and develop it in such a way as to have a positive impact on the appearance of the conservation area. Madam Chairman, just because 97 Chapel Street has not been maintained and cared for over several years shouldn't mean we just give up and let it be demolished and replaced with a pair of cookie-cutter, semi-detached pastiche houses which would detract from the street scene. The Billericay Conservation Area is under threat, Madam Chairman, and we should remember the responsibility we all have in protecting what we can of any conservation area within this borough for the future generations of our residents. Madam Chairman, on behalf of the future residents of Billericay, I would be voting to refuse planning permission for the reasons set out on page 107. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Rimmer?
Thank you, Chair. It's a really hard one, to be honest with you. I'm torn from side to side on this. I mean, if I look at my own ward in Pitsea South East, the old bingo hall that was probably a non-designated heritage asset was allowed to get to rack and ruin, and to the extent that we as a council had to then go forward and do a demolition order on it, in effect, because it was unsavable. And I wish it could have been saved. to be honest, and it was one that had much love from the residents themselves. When I look at this, I'm being told by the engineers from county that this building is savable, but then the question is, would actually anyone live in it? and that has actually been really put out there. And if nobody will live in it, how is it sustainable that this building is going to be maintained for the future? So I'm balancing this up in respect of if we had 2 family homes there instead. Now, what we're losing is an Edwardian building and replacing it with a mock Edwardian building, 2 mock Edwardian homes. It's really difficult, I mean, in that sense, because there's a sense of place as well. And we're being told that actually, and it's shown on the map, that it's surrounded by other buildings that are not even close to being non-designated heritage assets and don't add to the value of the conservation area. It really is quite a difficult one. I'm really torn on it. I think on balance, I think I might have to just, I've gone from side to side on this. I legitimately have on this one. I'm thinking maybe I'll go with the approval, or maybe I'll go with the refusal on this particular application. So I'm minded to hear others out on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm fully supportive of conservation areas. I actually live in one, although nothing as beautiful as that in Billericay. But nonetheless, Snoke Bridge, even though it's not that old, it's got some wonderful architecture, and so has this building, and it really should be preserved. It deserves it. I think Councillor Brown said earlier, we will never get this architecture back. Once they're gone, and they're gone for good. And we have nothing to look back on that's actually living. I would really love to see this building brought back into a livable state where everybody could enjoy, just like the residents that actually live there, how they enjoy living along there, even to see that property that has gone into neglect. I mean, it is shameful that this has happened, but I really do hope that somebody can see fit to put the finances in it. And I know one of the speakers did say about if there's anything the council can do to help with preservation or something of some kind, so that it can not get into further neglect than it is. But I really do support the recommendation here to refuse the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. Councillor Brockman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to say something quite contentious here. Usually I do. I'm absolutely sick to death of seeing around this country, not just in the area, but in the country, the amount of places that are left to go to rack and ruin, where people buy them, they sit back and do nothing, right? And whether, you know, with all due respect to the couple over there, the mum and the son, the owners, they have done nothing to try and stop it. It's just happened. And this poor building, I've been looking at the pictures, it's got some really lovely structure inside. And it, as Terry said, it's crying out for some love and attention, and it really is. However, I'm not too sure, as in that area, that it would be the right thing to do. And knocking it down and making 2 sympathetic buildings for 2 families to live in would be another idea. So, like the others, I'm so torn about this, I really am. But I just wish there'd be a ruling in this country where people cannot just buy places, let them go to rack and ruin, and then think that people like us are going to lay back and say, yeah, all right, off you go. Knock it down and fill your boots. That's it.
Apparently, I've broken the microphone. Sorry about that. Councillor Harrison, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with many of the points that Councillor Brockman just made. It is so disappointing when you look at properties like this that could be livable if only they were, treated a bit better. I don't know if the current owners have owned it for the full time that it's been empty, or if they bought it recently. But yeah, the current state of the building is not livable. The photos in the report are obvious, but the thing that's concerning me most is that reading the officer's assessment in the report, it seemed to me that it kept coming up time and time again that the only reason why it shouldn't be that the developers shouldn't be able to knock it down and start again is that the mould and damp isn't bad enough. And so all that says to the developers is leave it for another 5 years. I mean, it's already been 14 years, so what's another 4 or 5? Let the damp get worse, and then have another assessment in a few years' time and put the application back in. And I mean, if the property's been empty for so long, there's nothing logical that I can think that would make me think that the developers or any future developers or any owners of this site would do anything other than just leave it for a few years, let it get even worse, and then bring it back. And so then it makes me think, why don't we just get on with it now? Build 2 homes where families can live in the borough. The site is it's perfect for a few small family homes. As far as I can see, the design of the new property, while it's not completely in line with the heritage property, and it is a shame that we are losing these properties. But I suppose when it's over 100 years old, some properties do eventually get lost. But I feel like the design of the new properties are largely in keeping as much as possible with the current one. And so, yeah, I just feel that if we don't approve this evening, then in 4 or 5 years' time we're going to see this back, and if it's not approved again, then in 4 or 5 years' time after that we'll see it back again. And it's just a shame that in the meantime there's a property that's being used for antisocial behaviour, for graffiti, for drugs, things that people in Billericay do not want happening in that property, and that's going to be continuing until this council does something about it. So I'm minded to go against the officer's recommendation and vote for, just so we can get something better in the site that's currently there.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Did anyone else wish to speak on this particular item? Councillor Brown.
I wasn't planning to, but I've got a few frustrations now. When this planning application first came before us in October, I was mindful at that time to approve. The reasons being, when we talk about Elizabeth Cottage as an example, Elizabeth Cottage was not in any way saved. Even the front of it eventually fell down and had to be rebuilt. It is now, a block of flats in essence. It is not the heritage site that it was. What it does do is smarten that corner up. We had many conversations, did the chair and I, about what a mess it looked. But what a mess it looked, is that necessarily a reason why we should allow anything to occur? I was mindful to approve it before because the reports that we had before us said this building was not able to be saved. I think tonight, looking at this report that has led our officers to recommend that we refuse it, does not give me clarity. It does not seem, I need to take on board the things that are that the applicant has put forward in saying the ways in which that they feel the report was not done in the way that they would expect. There is language in that report that says that it's not completely reliable, and so the only thing that's going to stop me now from saying that I wish to approve it is a report saying that building may be saved. I need to, like Councillor Rimmer, consider that. And consider just because something may be able to be saved does not mean it will be. At the end of the day, developers within our town, and we, you know, many of us have seen Mr Jarvis here before, developing other properties throughout the Billericay area. Whether we like it or not, developers are there to make money. Property, they buy property, they renovate it, they improve it, and they provide homes for people. And if we are being told by the applicant that they believe the cost of doing so is prohibitive, that is telling us that that developer does not plan to do that. So we might tonight say that we don't want it demolished because we want it to be put back in a way that it used to be. But if we don't believe anyone's going to actually do that, like Councillor Harris has said, should we therefore say, take it away? Having said all of that, I don't think I can support it. I was, as you know, quite an advocate of trying to do something about Elizabeth Cottage, and I feel very disappointed by the way that ended up. Billericay, there are buildings that are key that make it what it is. If we are saying that our conservation area is important, and we have building rules and regulations around that conservation area being that important, then unless the benefit to the wider community outweighs the less than substantial harm that's going to be done by demolishing, then we can't approve this. In the previous application, there was evidence to say that the community would benefit to a greater extent than the less than substantial harm to the asset. That has not been able to be shown here. Unfortunately, the only evidence we've got is this report before us, and I don't really think it's very adequate, but it's all I've got to go on. Help. Come on, councillors, what do we think? Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to come in on this debate? You've all had a bit of a say. There's been questions posed about from the floor and from a couple of members about whether we are able to do anything to conserve the building, i.e. with regards to putting fencing around it, and also one suggestion that we compulsorily purchased it. I just wondered if officers wish to give any comments on any of that.
In terms of, oh sorry, your thing's on. In terms of empty homes, I'm not sure whether the council's got a policy for purchasing properties that are empty. But if properties are empty, the local authorities have the ability to purchase those properties and put them to a new use. So if that was the council's intention, the council could buy the property and then obviously convert itself back into a residential dwelling. The only other options we've got would be to take action under Section 215 of the Town Planning Act, which basically deals with untidy buildings and untidy sites. So that would be requiring them to fix the roof, to make it, put Sitex up to make the building less unsightly, and obviously then protect the building for a little longer until they decided what to do, that we could then reach an agreement on.
Well, I hope that answer helps a little bit to those that have raised that sort of question. You know, we were talking earlier on about the previous application and how how people didn't want it to be converted, but at least the proposal was it was converted to and kept the fascia. This it's either a case of say no, you can't knock it down, and as some members of the committee have said, and wait and see what happens, or say no, actually we agree that you can do it, and at least something gets done to it. I don't know what anyone thinks on that. Councillor Rimmer, you wish to come back in again?
Yes, thank you to members. Actually, it was really quite useful discussion for me in terms of coming to some sort of conclusion. I think I'm going to go against the officer recommendation on this and vote to approve. To be honest, everything Christine just said reminds me of the bingo hall in Pitsea, and what happened with that. We started with tidy up notices and we ended up with demolition, and it was a long, painful process of managing an eyesore on the high street that the residents were all concerned about. There were 2 fires, there were squatters. All of this seems like it's going down a similar path. What Councillor Harrison said is quite right. You know, these developers seem like nice, reasonable people. They probably move on, and somebody else will manage it into decline, and that's quite possible. I think we've just got to pull the band-aid off, as the Americans would say, on this one, and go with this and get these reasonably nicely designed, sympathetic Edwardian houses, which will probably just add, well, not, I see, I shouldn't say add, but I don't think give significant harm to this conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blake, you wish to come in?
Yeah, eventually. I really and ahhing about this one, if I'm being honest. And what's really intrigued me is what couple of things that happened lately in previous plan applications, where if it gets tight, if you know, we're past it. I know it's Greenbelt issues. We're past it because at the moment it's an absolutely dump, and it'll improve the way it looks. And this sort of smells like that. And Councillor Harrison and I very rarely agree when it comes to our debates on this, but I have to agree with him on this one. Where do we stand on the situation where it's not quite fit, it's fit for purpose now, although initially thought it wasn't. So what if we do sit on it, or they sit on it, and in 3 or 4 years' time they come back to this same committee and say, well, actually it's not fit for purpose, and then you're going to pass it. That's just the one thing that's really sort of bugging me, is the fact that just because it's, you know, it's fit for purpose now, just, although to spend all that sort of money on is going to be an awful lot. But in 3 or 4 years' time, if that, we're going to have a situation where they'll come back again and say, well, actually, it's not fit for purpose, and we'll all be sticking our fingers up for it, sticking our fingers up for it, sticking our hands up for it. So that's a concern that I have at the moment. I can't believe it. Almost Councillor Harris has always persuaded me to actually vote a certain way, so put that on record.
Right, does anyone else wish to have, has anyone else got anything to say on this? Okay. Just a second. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that. Yep, we're going to go to the recommendation on this application, which can be found on page 98, which is that the planning application number 23/00517/FULL be refused planning permission for the reason which is set out on page 107 of the report, which reads that there is no clear and convincing justification for the demolition and replacement of the existing building, which has been found to make a positive contribution to the conservation area and is a non-designated heritage asset in its own right. Notwithstanding the harm resulting from the demolition of the building, the proposed replacement building would result in the loss of heritage significance from the site due to its design, which would not preserve the existing archaeological, architectural and historic interest. The proposal therefore does not preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area, and it would result in less than substantial harm to the area's significance and the total loss of significance of a non-designated heritage asset. The loss of the building would not be outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme. As such, the development would be contrary to the conservation and enhancement of the historic environment objectives of the MPPF and the Billericay Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan 2011. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of that recommendation, please? That's 3. Those against that recommendation, that is 5. Okay, so and I'm abstaining, yes. And so is Kevin. Okay, thanks. That's 2 abstentions then. So that being the case, the recommendation falls. We would normally need to defer so that we can get reasons for an alternative, but as it happens, we've already got them written for us. So when I can find them.
Page 135, I think it was, Chairman.
Yep, I think it was as well. Thank you. Right. I'm going to read an alternative resolution for us to vote on, which is that planning application number 23/00517/full be granted planning permission subject to the conditions set out below, which start on page 135 and go through to page 139. So can I have a show of hands for those in favour of that recommendation, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 in favour, and those against that recommendation. Okay, that's 4 against, and any abstentions? That's 1 abstention. So that recommendation for approval of the application to build is carried. Thank you very much for your perseverance this evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I believe this will be our last one of the municipal year. So I wish you all luck in your elections. Good night.